In the last section, we did some initial setup with React Router DOM. We imported 2 helpers from the library, and then we also created 4 dummy components. Now, without further ado, let's figure out how we actually make use of React Router DOM inside of our app component. The first thing I'm going to do inside of here is clean out the hi there text that we currently have on the screen. I am going to leave this div inside of the app component for now, because we are going to come back later and make use of this top level div right here to get some CSS working properly inside of our application. So this div that we're going to leave right here solely about CSS. Inside this div, I'm going to place the browser router component. So both the browser router and the route objects right here, they are React components that we can freely return from any component that we create. So right here inside the app component, I'll make browser router, and I'm going to close the tag off like so. Then inside of here, we are going to place a collection of different routes. Each route is going to specify a rule or kind of a relation between a possible address that a user can visit inside of our application and a component to actually display on the screen. Now, before we start adding these routes in, there is one tiny little gotcha. This browser router component right here expects to have at most 1 child. At most. And when I'm talking about child, and when I say at most 1, I'm talking about the components that we pass directly to the browser router. We could not do something like this right here. These are 2 self-closing divs. They are 2 separate children that are being passed to browser router. If we attempted to run our application like this, we would see an error message that said something like, hey, the browser router only expects to get at most 1 child. So what that means is that we have to pass in just 1 component, like so. Now do take really look at this div right here. Notice that when I had the 2, these are self-closing divs. So we don't usually place self-closing divs. We usually have something a little bit closer to this. I just wanted to do a quick example of 2 children. So I am going to delete the second one. We still have 1 child right here. Even though it has an opening and closing tag, it still is exactly 1 child component, just to be clear. So now inside of this div is where we are going to set up some of the different routing rules of our application with this route component. We'll set up our first route to display the landing page to our users. Okay, so that's going to be the first route that I want to put together. So I'm going to place a route component, and I'm going to give it configuration to tie together a possible route or a possible address, a possible URL that a user might visit inside of our application, and the component to display on the screen when a user goes there. So for this first route that I want to have displaying the landing component, and remember, I want to show that landing component whenever the user visits the route emaily.com, just like / like basically emaily.com, so basically the landing page of our application. So to set that relationship up, I'm going to pass in a prop of path equal to / and component equal to, with curly braces, landing, like so. And then we'll close it off with a self-closing tag. With React Router, the / like this, just by itself, is assumed to mean the root route of the application. So this route right here would come into effect whenever the user went to an address like emaily.com, assuming that our application is hosted at emaily.com. We never specify the actual domain name in here, so we are not doing something like emaily.com or herokuapp.com or whatever our domain is. It is just the route portion of the URL. So whenever a user goes to our root route, show the landing component. That's it. That's all that's going on here. So I think we could probably test this out inside the browser. I'm going to save this component, and then I'll change back over to the browser and wait for the refresh. Okay, so here's localhost 3000, and we'll wait for our little refresh up here. Now when the page refreshes, you're going to see a warning message if you have the console open, and it says, hey, you have some unused variables. All this means to say is that inside of our app.js file, we created a couple different variables, but we never actually used them. This is just a warning right here. It is not an error message. It's just saying, hey, just so you know, you have some unused variables. You might want to clean those up. So it's just giving us a little bit of help. Now what's way more relevant is the fact that we see the text on the screen of landing. Great, that's basically what we want. We just want to see the landing component appear on the screen. So we now have at least one component that shows up when a user visits the root route of our application. Let's continue in the next section, and we're going to start to add on a couple more routes to this thing that uses the dashboard and the survey new components. And when we add those additional routes on, we're going to start to see some slightly mysterious behavior. So let's continue the next section, and we're going to see what happens, and we'll figure out how React Router handles some of its more advanced routing rules. So I'll see you in just a second.